We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about the regular broadcast of news about creative arts and culture, to make provision about duties on the Secretary of State, Ofcom and certain broadcasters in relation to such broadcasts and for connected purposes. First, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me declare an interest. I'm a classically trained violinist who learnt at Beecham Music Group and benefited from a brilliant musical provision at Newent Community School. I'm also a guitarist, keyboardist and singer-songwriter who played in rock bands including Eyes of Eden, Never Home Club, 10 Second Star and the New Loafers. And unless you were going to gigs in the late 1990s in Gloucestershire, or you were listening to Radio 1 at one particular moment, on one particular evening, you won't have heard of those bands. I want to ask members of this House, when was the last time you heard or saw news dedicated to culture or our brilliant creative arts? Of course, you will have seen dedicated coverage of a singular creative news story, but what about a bulletin that brings you regular updated coverage of cultural events happening both locally and nationally? Art exhibitions, concerts, orchestras, dance classes, art groups and choirs. So many great events are happening that we just don't hear about, due in part to irregular and fragmented news coverage. Yet we all know when the local football club down the road was relegated or hopefully indeed promoted. People might instinctively think that sport has an enormous audience, and of course it does. Well, millions of people attend theatres, galleries, concerts and cinemas every week as spectators. This is not a niche interest. It is a massive, underserved audience. Regular creative arts bulletins would serve that audience in the same way that sports bulletins serve sports fans. But there's another audience, Madam Deputy Speaker, beyond the spectators. The participants, young and old, in all genres, at all levels, professional and amateur, elite and perhaps most importantly, ordinary. Ordinary people participating in the creative arts are doing something extraordinary for themselves, their community and far beyond. A refrain heard all too often following the regular news programmes is, and now for the sports and weather. But what if we add one extra word? I hope that my bill might lead to the following phrase, and now for the sports, culture and the weather. It would be a small but important alteration to how we receive news and the value we place on cultural events. My bill in practice would instruct ministers and responsible bodies such as Ofcom to engage with and ultimately, if necessary, require broadcasters who run regular news programmes to complement their sports news bulletins with a dedicated culture bulletin highlighting creative arts events and activities. By no means would this replace sports coverage or seek to replicate it, since, of course, sports have more competitions and leagues and therefore generate a certain type of interest and therefore news. It would simply level the playing field, if you excuse the pun. Or to put it another way, bring things into harmony, ensuring that everyone is playing in the same key. Now, thank you for laughing. I love sport. Indeed, I represent the constituency of rugby, probably the only place in the world where a sport was both born in and named after a town. It is important that sports news is broadcast. It is an important part of people's lives and promotes healthy lifestyles and much more. Regular sports bulletins in broadcast news normalise sport as an important part of community life. But there is no objective reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why the same should not be done for the creative arts. I would argue that cultural news items are just as important a fixture in people's lives. After all, who doesn't listen to music, watch films, or appreciate artwork or poetry? Cultural institutions, theatres, cinemas, galleries and local venues, and not just physical venues, but also the numerous musical groups, such as brass bands, artists' groups, creative clubs in schools, colleges and universities, and in civil society, host newsworthy events every day. Yet there is no consistent, recognisable broadcast space where audiences can receive up-to-date creative arts news. This represents a clear gap in the current provision. Cultural events and the creative arts are a massive contributor to our economy. According to the House of Commons Library, in 2024, the latest year available, the creative industries generated 145.8 billion in gross value added, accounting for 5.5% of total UK GVA. In comparison, the sports industry generated 20.6 billion, or 0.8% of total UK GVA. Exports in 2021 include 9.1 billion in goods and 45.6 billion in services. Madam Deputy Speaker, the economic contribution is undeniable, but the benefits of promoting cultural news items go far beyond the economic. Creative arts engagement improves physical and mental health, cognitive function, recovery and social connection. A DCMS Commission report found Grade A evidence that arts engagement reduces depression, improves early years development, enhances mood and life satisfaction, and supports older people's cognitive and, importantly, physical health. Social prescribing shows a return of approximately £3 for every £1 invested. We often hear how sports participation improves discipline, teamwork and confidence. In essence, some important hard skills. But people often have the misconception that the creative arts are all about soft skills, or as I like to put it, sitting around the campfire singing Kumbaya. Now, I've done that. It's lovely.
Don't do it now.
But it's not the only part, and I'm not going to do it now, as my honourable friend tries to induce me to do. If you learn an instrument or create a painting, it takes massive amounts of hard work. If you play in an orchestra or act in a play, that's discipline. So the creative arts are about soft and hard skills. And we're told that in this age of AI, we need creative thinkers. We're told that, aren't we? As well as those with hard skills. Increasing the visibility of cultural news would stimulate interest among the public in becoming a spectator, participant, or both. It would inspire people, especially young people, to engage in the right kind of AI, actual involvement. It would broaden the reach of creative arts to new and more diverse audiences. It would help stimulate local high streets and local economies and drive job creation, particularly in a sector where it's often too hard for artists to make a living despite their talent and hard work. It would help the creative arts to strengthen community cohesion. And how would this work in practice? Madam Deputy Speaker, my bill would legislate for a central pool of news items that organisations can submit to, from which regional and national broadcasters could source their stories. Ofcom would have a duty to amend the broadcasting code, and all public service broadcasters and others deemed by the Secretary of State to have a significant audience would be required to include regular cultural news bulletins. As part of my campaign, I have launched an online petition to gather support from the creative world, the creative industries and the general public. So don't just take my word for it. More than 250 organisations and individuals already back my idea. Creative arts bulletins featuring in all news broadcasts will elevate and normalise the creative arts, stimulate interest in schools, promote activities at both national and local levels, boost engagement and participation, and support town centre regeneration and economic growth. The bill does not require government spending. It does not subsidise the arts, although I obviously welcome more funding for the arts under this Labour government. It does not displace or denigrate sport. It simply ensures that creative arts and culture are given the visibility that they so deserve in our national conversation. We have the best creative arts in the world, Madam Deputy Speaker, and one of the most vibrant scenes at all levels of society, particularly in my constituency of Rugby. And the honourable members. It's time that more people heard about this, heard about what's going on nationally, regionally and locally. Madam Deputy Speaker, creative arts bulletins would help bring about the mind shift needed throughout society to normalise, celebrate and promote participation in the creative arts and help embed them ever more deeply in our national consciousness.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Adam Jogi, Jess Brown-Fuller, Kat Eccles, Bambos Charlambus, Peter Princely, Dr Simon Ofer, Dr Becky Cooper, Jonathan Davies and myself, Madam Deputy Speaker.
John Slinger.
Just encouraging.
Creative Arts and Culture, Broadcasting Requirements Bill.
Second reading what day?
5th of June, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The 5th of June.
Yeah.